Hey everybody, it's Moonhorse again. Coming in just before this video with a little bit of information. We're talking about the University of Utah healthcare program. A friend of mine is not doing well and needs you guys, if you can, to look into this program, donate if you can, help out if you can. They're looking for, donations, people who can do live kidney transplants, the whole thing. This is a very good cause, and it's very, very important. So if you guys have anything you can do to help, or any way that you can help at all, please do. It would mean a lot to me. It would mean a lot to everybody. It's not just me. It's about everybody. Everybody's in this together, so we should all put together to actually do something. Like, if you're interested, or you have any way that you can possibly get in touch with this, or if you're in the area and you can do something to help out, you can contact them at uofulivingdonor.org. Or you can contact them at the phone number 801-587-8816. If you're interested in helping my friend specifically, when you get through to somebody or you're talking to somebody, ask for Corinne C. Powell. That's who needs the help right now. It's this person who asked me to kind of help out, not just for her, but for everybody. So if you want to help out, you want to contribute to a good cause, you want to do something good, really help these people out. They could use it. Alright, so now on with the show. Today we're going on a special journey, kids. You and me. Today we're going to learn about the Final Fantasy VII house. I've read a little bit of this from here and there, and it's very odd, so I'm just going to read verbatim what I have here. I was inspired by reading someone else's account of internet crazies gone bad. Now, this has been in my head for a long time. There's a group of very dangerous individuals out there, and I really would like to detail what they did to me and mine. I want to warn people away from them. I want you to read my mistakes and watch out. These people are dangerous. This is not a joke. This is my experience with them. If others involved have stories or commentary, just send them to me. I'll add them in. I have one specific friend, Captain McCool, and he may find this very hard to read. Cap, if this makes you upset or sick, don't force yourself to read it. Hojo.org. How, when, where, why, what the fuck. Most people watching the journal now probably don't know this, but back in the day it was a pretty popular website devoted to characters Cloud and the very minor character Zack from Final Fantasy VII. It was really the only comprehensive one out there about the two, which is why I got noticed. I was used to receiving fan mail and other people's fan arts, which I would put up on the website. I actually haven't had anywhere near that kind of fame since then, and believe you me, I don't miss it. But anyway, I had my aim up on the website because I was new to interweb fandom and wanted people to come talk to me about the site. The feedback was awesome in my eyes. Met a lot of cool people this way, like Rita. I was always looking to promote the site, so when I got an IM from some stranger offering a link exchange, I was like, oh boy! I was expecting a little podunk GeoCities page, but then they told me they ran the domain hojo.org. I'd never been there before, but I ran a quick check. It looked mostly personal, with a little bit of shrine to a character Professor Hojo from the same game. I was like, oh, that's cool. Sure, we can link exchange. This person introduced themselves to me as Hojo, and pretty quickly started calling me Zack. I was okay with that, because Zack was, and still is, my favorite character in the game. For a while, it was mostly normal. This Hojo person seemed to be just another normal webmaster. We didn't have a whole ton in common, so we didn't talk that often. So one day I just got done putting up some art by Arborwin. It was one of the villain monster Genova as a dog creature. Gave it a little mini story under the image to be creative. Something about cold water and being strangled by tentacles or something. I don't remember now. But Hojo IMs me and tells me that it was really well written. Flattered, so I thank him. Then it starts getting weird. I'll try to remember how it went, but it's been 4 years now. It was really realistic, he says. Is that a memory? Understandably, I'm like, what? Is that one of your memories? I was unfamiliar with the concept being put to me at the time. I'm still pretty internet virginal. I just said, no, I made that up. He seemed disappointed, and I didn't understand why. We didn't talk for a few days. Then an IM comes at me, where he says, "My wife would like to talk to you." Oh, how cute, I'm thinking. It's a married couple that runs the Hojo Shrine. Sure, I'll talk to your wife. Wives are nice. They're nice people. Idiot alert. Now, realize during this time I was a college freshman. Like most college freshmen, I was at the height of my idiocy. Friends will remember I wasn't quite smart about drinking, to be really kind. And so I hate to say it, but my memory of this time is a little spotty. I'm going to remember what of the build-up I can. The actual events are clear as crystal. Shit don't leave you. The wife, whose name is Jen, begins pressuring me about magic. Now, I was pagan for a brief stint in high school, but like most kids, I grew out of it. What she's telling me was long since bogus in my mind, but I put up with it. All right. She kept saying how she was a sorceress and stuff, and half the time, because she insisted I call her Genova, it would emote poking me with tentacles and stuff. I figured she was only role-playing. I was like, okay, that's cool. It's the internet. I have some friends who are furries and do the same thing, talk about tails and stuff. Yeah, I can deal with this. Then came the good old bombshell. I was asked if I had any memories of past lives. I do believe in past lives. I think it's a pretty valid cycle, given how many cultures believe in it. So I told her, no, I didn't, but I did believe in it. I should have never said that. It was like inviting the vampire into my house. Jen's attack was swift and sure. She began a flurry of explaining things to me, how there are alternate universes. Do you grant me that? Sure, there could be. And in those universes, maybe, just maybe, video games actually happened. I thought it could be possible, because I liked imagining anything is possible. Through all this and this flurry, she tells me that she thinks in a past life I was actually Zack from Final Fantasy VII. Think about it, she said. You're both country-grown. You both have that instinct of dragging off friends who could be left behind. You take a bullet for someone, right? You say you don't believe in magic or any of that, and he wanted to be a mercenary. For all his 5 or 6 lines, you have similar speech patterns. You even live in a basement like he was locked in one, and you hate it. Addle your brain with freshman idiocy and vodka, and this will suddenly make sense. Sure, maybe. I'm not him now, I said, but it was possible. You are our Zack, she says. By our, I later found out she meant a large group of people whom she had been similarly led into the conclusion that they had been video game characters at some point in time. There was an Ares, a Sid, my then significant other became Red 13, etc. They lived with an overweight, dislikable man they called Gast. For those unfamiliar, these are all characters in the game. Some, like me and Sid, who I still call Sid, even although now Miho and Zeryl, I'm not sure what that means, had one foot in reality despite it all. I was willing to bite and say maybe at some point I was this guy, but I was also not about to model my life after a game. But they seemed to just want a new friend and some online role play, and I was pretty cool with that. For the most part, we didn't touch on the past life thing at all. Jen would sometimes have chats with other people who she was friends with, and we'd all talk or discuss additions, or just little things like that. All in all, I was fine with them. They were a little flakier than my preferred loaf of bread, but I could live with that. They always called me by my screen name, which confused me. Yasha made me cringe, because I was afraid of people, even 4 years ago, would think that I was an Inuyasha fantard. I tried mentioning this once or twice, but it didn't really get anywhere. First time they asked me to visit them, I think, was around Christmas. It cost me $300 to go by bus from my podunk school to their apartment in State College. They assured me that they would pay to feed me. I would just visit for a weekend, meet people, hang out. At the bus stop, Hojo met me in a lab coat. Hojo was, I knew by now, actually a girl. Not transsexual, just a girl. They were lesbians, and that was cool with me. I'm just noting it here to avoid future confusion. When we arrived at the apartment, Jen, who insisted I call her Genova and would often refer to herself as Jenny Nova, came storming up to Hojo and I, screaming in Hojo's face. I have no idea what it was about. She's wearing a purple skirt pulled up around her breast. It looked like she had just gotten out of bed, and I was, to say the very least, intimidated. About 3 seconds later, she whirled around in a quick change, suddenly the nicest person ever. Whatever she was mad about was out the window. It was the weekend before Christmas, and all through the apartment. It was a pretty big mess. I brought my rat with me because I planned to go from State College, PA, straight home to Brooklyn. I also had brought Christmas gifts. Jen told me earlier that she was a great artist, so I dropped $30 on real high-quality watercolors for her. The apartment was cluttered, and there were papers and stuff everywhere. The floor was covered in glitter, but I figured they were just kind of goofy college students. I mean, college students make a mess. When Jen showed me her art, though, I realized she would have no idea how to use watercolors I'd bought her. They were, at best, brush being slopped around on the page. Nervously, when I gave over the gift, I asked if she knew how to use them. Of course, of course. Okay, I said. Maybe she just hasn't had the good tools. But she does know how to use them. I was very happy, though, and that was what mattered. Never mind, the next time I visited, the watercolors were entirely used up, except for the concept of mixed pigment and water was not known to Jen. She thought you used them like acrylics because of the texture of the pigment. I was taken around town for the weekend and introduced to quite a few random people, most of which now I can't really remember faces or names. One in all likelihood was the super awesome Jai, who is like my surly mentor. It was snowing, I remember. I was very cold. Not good at being introduced, so for the most part I tried to keep away from the stuff going on. I do remember in the mall Jen had what was to be the first of several incidents where I felt frightened of her. She stormed to the side of the mall inside and began sulking. The reason for this was because they didn't have enough money to buy something. I don't even remember what, but she wanted it, and they couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford it either, so I was stuck in the middle of this. I tried to stay out of it. Fortunately, it seemed to have passed when we got back to the apartment. We had a good time piling up stuffed ladybugs and laughing at the Mengai bug. Don't know what that means. About this time, I started to realize, though, Jen wasn't role-playing when she talked about her children and other selves. Jen is what the internet calls a soul bonder, or in other words, batshit loony. She believes she has a lot of people living in her head, talking, and when she wants to take on a personality that best fits the situation for her personal gain, she acts it out, i.e. if she wanted to get sympathy, she would raise the pitch of her voice and pretend to be an innocent child. Now, I was a dumb college freshman, but I wasn't brain damaged, much, yet. I knew it was just Jen pretending. I'd already experienced the actor acting for self-gain in a high school drama friendship, so I just humored her when she did this, but I wasn't about to treat her any differently. About this time, I got into a fight with my mother, who expected some usual unreasonable nonsense from me. Mother's the only person who can make me cry, and because of my view on crying is if no one is around to care, why bother doing it, I let myself cry there. Jen and Hojo suggested I stay longer and began talking very, very drastic measures. That I needed to get away from my home, that I could abandon my family. Here's the number of a youth support group, etc. I honestly was frightened by this. My family is certainly high on my list of things I get stressed all to kingdom come, but I don't want to cut off all means to them ever. I managed to work it out so I would go home 2 days later as a sort of take that to the family. Jen told that her mother was the same way and that Hojo had gone all the way to California to rescue her. Jen's mom was apparently a horrible, abusive person who hated her daughter for being a lesbian. Her father was absent or divorced or something. It was never clear. She kept saying how even though her grandmother was rich, she didn't love her. She had these stories of an abusive friend who trained her to be a Sephiroth or something. I was sympathetic, always having been one to believe in don't complain, people have it worse than you shtick. So a few days later, we went to the bus stop to catch my bus to Brooklyn. I was crazy beforehand because my rat was still in her travel cage after about 4 days, and I had no money, and on and on. I wanted to get to the stop early so I wouldn't miss the bus. Jen assured me that she knew what time the bus was because it was on her computer. I couldn't check for myself. When we got to the bus station, they told me a bus had left an hour ago. I was delayed 1 day by what Jen swore was an honest mistake. I was willing to believe it. I went home. Overall, the first visit was not so bad. I visit them frequently because they always seem to want to meet someone. They always want me to meet someone. I met up with Aries, who I've since called the Cetra. She was a cool, nerdy college girl with a big brain. She liked old RPGs and had been to Japan as well as going to study in Europe. We were pretty good friends, but Jen repeatedly kept talking about how she was quote, going to put aphrodisiacs in our food, and because I was Zach and she was Aries, we needed to sleep together. because neither her nor I were on the train to Hot Dog Land. We just played video games together instead. Jen was very disappointed and immediately assumed the personality of Aries' imaginary boyfriend, lowering her voice and commanding things of her. I myself have always been squicked by personal displays of affection. It comes part and parcel with being asexual. But I had to lie on my guest futon while Jin and Aries snuggled, made loud kissing noises, and giggled with each other. Could not wrap my head around this, how this girl who claimed to be straight could not see that she was just laying with another woman making out. Edit. I turned my back on them at this point because I was squicked. I hear kissing noises, but I can't confirm if they were actually making out. It may have just been Jin kissing her hand or something. It really bugged me. I turned my back on them and tried to sleep. The next day, Jin decided to show me magic battles, which are basically like LARP fights. She would swing around a stick or a sword to music and feign injury when Hojo threw stuff at her, making some goofy hand movements. Hojo would do the same when Jin would thrust her staff forward or something, and they tried to get me to do it, but I can't act. I can't pretend I'm doing magic because I'm not that out of it. Eventually, Jin dragged me onto my feet, and it was something like a karaoke. I kept laughing at both myself and the fact that I could do some sort of limp wrist movement, and Jin would throw herself on the floor panting afterwards, kept telling me, "See, you can use magic." And I kept laughing and I knew what I was doing. I was not that out of it, but I was ready to keep humoring them because it wasn't hurting anyone. There were a lot of visits like this. Jin did a lot of things that I can't think of in chronological order. When she was stressed about something, she would grow faint in town because I didn't know her very well. I thought maybe she was anemic and would hurry to help her. Also, I told her when she first asked me to visit that I can't eat meat. I cannot eat red meat specifically. I was raised as a vegetarian, so my body never got used to digesting it. Red meat makes me actually physically sick by no choice of my own. But every night, Jen would cook red meat, and I would eat it because it's all there was, and then I would get sick. Increasingly during my visits, each of which was a $300 bus ride, Jen would ask me for money to go food shopping or toy shopping or whatever. I'd give it over because I always feel like the guest ought to bring some stuff for the host as a thank you. When my friends have their families pay for me at dinner, I always feel slightly guilty, so I gave over some cash every time. Around spring, we were still fairly good friends, despite the things that Jin did disturbed me. At one point, her and Hojo had locked me into a soundproof glass chamber in the basement of a school building because they wanted me to remember being Zack. I panicked, but not because I fucking thought I was in a video game mansion. After banging on the door and jerking the handle and freaking out, I was finally let out, and I was shaking. I was not pleased with them for the rest of the day. So anyway, in spring, Hojo IM'd me, knowing a few of my musical taste, and mentioning that there was a free music show in town, and Jimmy Eat World was playing. Zara got hooked on Jimmy Eat World from her brother, and we were both pretty into them at the time. She was like, hell yeah, it's worth it, and we set off down there. When Zara arrived, the first thing Jen did was assign her a role. She was Vincent Valentine because she had long hair. Zara was also a dumb freshman at the time, and although her dumb was more the angst kind of dumb, so this sat okay with her. She likes Vincent as a character. He's one of her favorites. Jen immediately wanted to try a past life regression with us. Yes, video game past life. We were taken to their bedroom, which smelled like poon, and made to lie on the floor. Jen put on a loop of an MP3 of The Nightmare is Just Beginning, which I now realize is hilariously appropriate. The song that plays when you unlock Vincent's character in Final Fantasy VII. Now, Zara and I cannot do anything seriously when we're put together, even as dumb freshmen. To Jen's hardcore frustration, even though Zara and I both tried to be serious and act our part, we wound up joking and laughing at each other. In frustration, she declared that we were too silly to do this tonight and that we would have to do it another time. Zara the whole time was sneezing really badly. I jokingly suggest that she was allergic to magic. In actuality, it was probably the dust and glitter everywhere. Jen and Hojo took this very seriously. Of course, allergic to magic, we can fix that. There was a lot of staff shaking and waving over Zara, gibberish chanted in Cetra, or Elvish, quote-unquote. When it was all done, Zara kept sneezing. Darn. Since Zara and I are both artists, Jen wanted us to draw her a doujinshi? Okay. She showed us some doujinshi that Kat, love you Kat if you're reading this, had drawn for them, but Jin wanted ours to be serious and involve tentacle rape, and Hojo and Vincent Valentine. A collaboration, she suggested. I already mentioned Zara and I together pretty much diffuse any seriousness that could exist. What Jin wound up with, and once again was not happy with, was a comic that involved marshmallow peeps over people's genitals. A complete lack of genitals. Commentary on the fact, pictures upside down stick houses with captions like Ibsen's Summer Home. Complete divergence into a Sid X Vixen plot that and chit chat between characters. Oops. Zara and I went to the concert alone because Jin and Hojo don't like music or crowds. We had tons of fun, but the ground was horribly muddy. Our pants were caked in it from doing stupid, goofy stuff while the music played, like swinging each other around until we lost footing and slipped. Some college guys had been rolling in the mud, were walking down the street asking for hugs, so we hugged them and it covered all of us. We walked in the door. Jin was furious. She made us stand in the bathtub and clean ourselves. These are probably the best memories I have of meeting these guys. The ones where Zara and I are together diffused the loonydom. The next day we went to a mall where Jin kept wanting things. Between that and dinner, they successfully managed to suck $100 from Zara's ATM card without either of us noticing. Little things add up a lot. Also, we were late for the bus again, and thus missed a day of school because of it. Zara also remembers that during our visit, we wanted to play Ouija board. Ever since I've been a kid, whenever I get near one, it starts goofing off and spelling out stuff like breast or love you or stupid crap. I don't have to touch the thing. Maybe it's subconscious effect on people in my proxy. Or maybe it's just something else. But we always dubbed this effect Ame, because that's the sequence of letters that it would go to every time I was in the room. It sounds hokey, but it's like a harmless inside Ouija board joke. Jin exclaimed she knew Ame, and a man. And man, when someone is shoving the pointer around, you can feel it. Jin shoved the pointer all over the board, claiming it was Ame talking, even though it was saying serious hokey crap that the Ame would never say. Ame was more prone to going SEX and zooming off towards someone on the board. Haha. One thing Jin did that really disturbed me was that she would lie to people, shop owners, people on the phone, about who she was in order to get things. I very clearly remember her putting on a lab coat and calling various medical supply companies in the yellow pages, trying to get medical syringes. Thank God she didn't, because she would already make us all drink Mako, green Gatorade, and dye our food green. She probably would have injected us with green water if she got the syringes. She kept claiming that she was a medical student and needed them for research, but didn't have a prescription or permission from her professor because he was out of town. Thank God the companies weren't so dumb as to believe her. They pretty much gave her the, yeah, whatever, bye crazy heroin addict treatment. She'd also fib about being a student to get discounts or make friends. She was a medical student at CVS. Whether the CVS employees believed her or not, I'll never know, because she went in a lab coat. At the Christian bookstore, she was adamant about the fact that angels had talked to her and she lived with them. So, of course, the bookstore would give her free books and a discount. This is why Jin's vision of religion is such a hodgepodge. It's such a hodgepodge of mix and match whatever she felt suited the situation best. She pieces it together from movies, the internet, and a few free Christian books from less flaky, but still pretty flaky, people about angels. Through it all, though, I have to say, none of this was really that bad. Flaky maybe, and annoying, but not that bad. So I was ready to hit the go button when Jin and Hojo suggested I live with them over the summer. I get a job at State College and just hang out there. It'd be cool. A whole bunch of nerds, and I could help make rent. I was all about this because nothing drives me nuttier than being trapped in Brooklyn for months on end. I made the arrangements with my family and dragged my computer tower in my arms, God it hurt, through the New York subway and took a slightly cheaper $100 bus ride from New York to State College. I think it was the first night. Jin wasn't there. Honestly, I was getting along better with Hojo, who was also known as Del, Neens, or Renee at this point. So I was really glad. We went with Trish to see episode 1. Trish and I could already tell Uh, Trish, I could already tell, was anti-Jen, because Trish is smarter than little old me. I had an ultimatum from my mother: job in 3 days or come home. I realized how much hump I busted to find a job with no car, no phone number in the next 3 days. My dogs were dogged. Finally, I got one at a small supermarket. I asked the lady during the interview, because I was this naive to pay, if it would be enough to pay a third of rent and food, because I was living with two other people and needed to pay. Jen's only job was a babysitter, which she did infrequently at best when she felt like it. And Renee was a college student. The woman said, "Yeah, it's no problem, it's cool." I had my job. I was happy. That's when things started to go bad. I can't even say what came first, chicken or egg, but let's just say that after 1 week I was getting sick of it. I was the workhorse. I guess because Zach was there for the manly man as opposed to Jen the Cetra queen or Hojo the frail scientist. Jen quit her babysitting job and refused to look for another one. I was the only one who had to carry groceries to and from the house. The one who made the money to feed everyone. The one who had to fix or move furniture when it needed to be fixed or moved. My computer could rarely get online because Jen was almost 24/7. The rest of the time she would watch me as I typed, so I could never make a journal entry that read something along the lines of, "Jen is abusing me, please help me, God, I need to get out of here." But I had to be tough, and tough it out. That's my idiocy right there. But if you're noticing, I was starting to wise up. I stopped drinking so much, which contributed to this in a large part. It made me much, much less tolerant of bullshit. Jim was not supportive of me having a social life. When my phone ran out, I was not allowed to call home on my own. When I talked to people online, she would hang over my shoulder and ask who they were. Then she would write down the screen name and talk to them on her computer later. This is how she got a hold of Mellon and Meyer and God knows how many others. The only place I was really safe was, God bless it, for Cadia, because she didn't like how the client worked. Yeah, I don't play that game for the graphical interface, baby. I play it because it's never failed me in keeping me sane. Jen would and did keep a very strict track of my activities. If I was going out, I had to tell her where. I did not have a house key, so I had to make sure that they were home or I'd be locked out. I was a few times away. Oh, wait. I was a few times anyway, because Jen would go to sleep and I would stand at the door banging and not be able to get in. I had a few fun moments like dumpster diving, but I had to keep all these secret to myself or I'd get in trouble. And then there was the fighting. Not the silly magic fighting I talked about earlier, but actual fighting. Screaming fights, slapping, punching. The sound of flesh beating on flesh is not one you can miss. When I was 10, my parents went through a very rough divorce. I know these sounds, and they were bringing up really bad memories and bad feelings. And the apartment was small, so there was no way not to hear them. Hearing one of them wince or whimper, then the beating, and immediately after, the noisy sex. I'm not 100% sure, but I think somewhere this counts as a kind of emotional abuse. Like I said, I could not leave because I would be locked out. The apartment was on the second floor, so I could not break in. I was not officially on the lease, so I couldn't ask the landlord to let me in, or I risked being thrown out. I could not phone my family because Jen and Hojo would listen in like hawks and try to coach me on what to say and what to think. And I could not even break down and cry because the apartment was so small they'd know what it was and have to make up some lame magical excuse so they wouldn't choke what little freedom I had. I was not getting sleep for work. Jim would wake me up at 3 a.m. to see the fairy rings or fight some magical disturbance or whatever the fuck. My job also began cutting my hours because I was expendable, summer labor. So my paycheck dwindled. This check was all the money that was coming into the apartment. At one point, I felt horrible to say this, but Sidon paid for an entire month's rent. Not just my third, the entire thing. I owed Tika my soul for that one. In a normal college setting, I could have easily saved the money and kept up with rent. Swear, easily, even with my only paycheck. But I also had to do the food shopping. If it was up to me, we would have what most college kids do. Ramen, generic cereal, bread, water. But it was not up to me. Jen wanted steak. Not just any steak, $10 steak. And Gatorade, 2 kinds, fancy and special colored. And spices. All of this would last us one night of food, and my paycheck was gone. I couldn't even eat the food that was provided. The rest of the time, they demanded I ask my job for day-olds from the bakery and day-old sushi. I swiped coupons from work and used them whenever I could. I could not afford lunch because there was no breakfast. If one of my supervisors caught me with the day-olds, I would be in trouble. The others seemed to take pity, but didn't like that I was doing it. The day-olds I brought back, Jen complained that she didn't like the flavor. This was the only food coming into the house. My bank account was drained. I was drained. I brought home a girl I met on the street who'd just gotten out of prison. She was a silly little acid burnout with a kitten. I was desperate for human contact. Her name, I remember, is Hala Zakur, and she's from Washington, D.C. Hala was on her way home, and she'd been staying with a complete random stranger boy. She was the last of her money to call her mom and say she was okay. Jen did not like Hala. Jen wanted Hala to leave and was mad that I brought her home to hang out. Hala was oblivious, gloriously so, and didn't know. I wanted to stay with Hala and her kitten, who was named Ulysses Exploring the Top of the World, but Hala was ordered to leave. Sid occasionally would come over. When he did, I was glad because it was someone else. But he was, and still does, have his dickish moments. Joe would make these be-all, end-all Renee, and Renee would back her up. I began to think he was like that all the time and didn't want to hang out with him when he was gone. Once he came back, they had to restart the process of brainwashing me all over. They did have me brainwashed. I was terrified and miserable, but I was brainwashed. I know this because Jen had a fight with Aries at one point. I don't even know what the fuck it was over. I think Aries woke up to what Jen was doing and wanted out, and Jen was on about how she'd been betrayed or how they were so united. About this time, I began to read a few horror stories. Jen had made Aries sit in a bathtub full of ice cube and green food coloring as part of her Cetra training. It's a wonder the poor girl didn't get hypothermia, but Jen was up in arms. Apparently, Aries called one evening when Hojo and I were at the used bookstore stealing books. Yes, we're that poor. And said that she wanted some of her things back that she had left in the apartment. Jen exploded. She called Hojo's cell phone in tears, screaming she was going to kill herself. I believed it. Hojo called Sid and demanded he go over. Hojo called Aries and screamed at her. I told her off too. We rented a taxi with money we didn't have and raced home. Jen, who had been screaming she'd slit her wrist, sitting in the middle of the floor. Sid was draping damp cloths on her wrist. I woke up for a second and knew that this was bullshit. I had a problem with self-injury, so I knew very well the sight of a deep razor cut and the sight of a light one. I know well knife wounds. Jen had scratched herself horizontally on the wrist. Maybe it had been with a safety pin or a butter knife. It wasn't any kind of suicide attempt. At the most, it would sting. But I was still mad at Aries because I was supposed to be. I wrote her nasty emails. I joined them in bashing her. I ignored her when she came to pick up her stuff, even though she obviously wanted to still be friends with me. I regret that now because we never reconciled then. Maybe if I got a clue and tried to get out with her, things would have been different. These hissy fits of Jen's got more and more frequent, like the fighting. She never tried to slit her wrists again, though. Sometime around here, Jen wanted to move out of the apartment. The place was a pigsty. The reason was that Jen had never cleaned. All the cleaning was done by guests, who they had coming and going at intervals. I did the dishes frequently, but the trash was almost never taken out. It got to the point that where the apartment smelled like rotting flesh. Jen refused to believe it was the trash that needed to go out. She kept claiming some former owner must have done something, but it was a horrible mess. Their only solution, as they saw it, was to move out. They had a different apartment from the landlady, a one-room gig. I did not like this at all. At least in the current apartment, I could stay in the living room while they had sex in the bedroom or beat each other in the bedroom. Now I wouldn't have anywhere to go to escape. I started feeling desperate, trapped, with Jen over my shoulder whenever I wrote, and checking my blog the next morning. If she wasn't, I couldn't get anything out. I had not been drinking since I came there, but I was ready to start again. I could never talk to my friends when I could, I had to pretend everything was hunky-dory for when Jen talked to them. The few FERC people I knew were sympathetic, but there was nothing they could do to help. I couldn't go to Sid because what if he was on their side? What if he rejected me for being such an ass? I started to see Aries' point, and I was getting frantic. I started to sneak out and run down to empty parking lots at night to use the payphone to call my dad collect. He was the only one who knew what was happening, really, besides Czar. Those two were briefed on the situation, and both of them were telling me it sounded bad. But because Jen was always out on the prowl and would find me, I could never tell them quite how bad. Just that I was stressed, I was upset, I was sick of Jen being unable to go make money because she was pregnant with some astral baby or something. Moving day. God, this day is pinned in my mind. Supposedly Jen was to help us move, and Hojo would come back to help soon too, and so on. I had to leave work early to help. Work was already not paying for food, and I was weak and lightheaded and angry, but I would help. Summer was almost over, only a month to go. I could make it without breaking down, I was sure. But Jen had some great disturbance in the force or something and suddenly couldn't help us move. That left yours truly, because Hojo didn't come home till 6 p.m. I packed up all of their things. Jen refused to pack. She lay on the couch moping and wailing. I put everything in boxes, carried it outside, carried it across the lawn in bare feet, up 2 flights of stairs and into the new apartment. Gast at one point helped put things out on the lawn, but it was still me. I found their dildo in doing this. If small children can be scarred by Tub Girl, I can be scarred by opening a clothing drawer to move the contents and having a sticky purple gelatinous phallus roll at me. I can almost hear Marla Singer in my mind. Don't worry, it's not a threat to you. Jen knew I was packing that drawer and did not warn, apologize, or thank me. So after 4 hours I'm pouring sweat in the heat in State College, and this summer is so brutal, it eventually managed to damage the engine of my father's car. I'll cover that at the end of this. This was the heat that I walked to work in every day, and it was no wonder when I got there that I was always nauseated and dehydrated, and in general unfit to work. No food, no sleep, no water to drink. On your 29-minute walk to work in the sun will do that to you in general. I moved everything. I was enraged. I was getting to the end of my majestically long rope. I was finally waking up, but not enough to want to leave. In the new apartment, I remember talking with AI. An AI I installed on my computer, Mega Hal. Jen ignored me when I talked to Mega Hal because it wasn't a real person. If you talk to my old Hal, you can hear it say things, and you can hear it say things I said then. Things like, I wish I could just get out of here, or you're the only one I can really talk to right now. That goes to show you how fucking cut off from people I was. We did not have internet in the new apartment yet, so I couldn't even go through Furcadia or pretend I was happy on AIM. The shopping to fill the apartment was the worst. I remember this night with nausea. We went to Kmart, which was a long bus ride into town. I was already mildly upset because Hojo suddenly had money, and yet we weren't eating with it, and I wasn't able to phone home, but I like house shopping, so I was sedated, I guess. We needed very basic things: dish rack, dishes, silverware, cups, cooking pot, and dish towels. We found all of these, but then Jen saw cabbage cloths. I don't even know what a cabbage cloth is. I assume it's a cloth you wrap a cabbage in to keep it fresh. Jen wanted them for her cooking, so the cabbage wouldn't go bad. She never used cabbage in cooking. 1. And 2, that's what a crisper is for. But she wanted these outrageously priced plain thin white rags. Hojo said a towel would work. A fight erupted. Screaming fight. I can't even remember the details, but there was screaming and a lot of it. Jim screaming she didn't love Hojo anymore, that she was leaving her, and how dare she do this to her. Hojo screamed back that this happened every time and they didn't need it, etc., etc. They were both being just as bad, and people stared. Jen refused to take the bus home, and we had too many bags, and she would not carry any of them. I couldn't carry them all, so we took another taxi we couldn't afford. The poor driver was subjected to the screaming fight, interspersed with the awful tension. He and I tried to chit-chat about the seashore, but they would begin screaming over us. I could almost taste the subtext of what he was saying. Poor kid, you'd have to go home with them. And I wasn't seeing any way out soon. I didn't have the money for a phone call home, let alone a bus ticket, and calling my mom in all likelihood would only get me screamed at. I read some books, A Wrinkle in Time, Ender's Game. I think Ender's Game helped push me to my ultimate choice. The trash situation repeated in the new apartment. Jen talked about getting a kitten. I could not imagine a kitten in such a small apartment with people who refuse to clean or take the trash out. That purple skirt pulled over her breast I mentioned that Jen wore the first time I met her, she wore it every day. Every day. She never washed it. She didn't bathe either. She just dabbed herself in scented oils and glitter. God, the smell in that place. It was like a miasma of filth with sparkle, sunshine, fairy, artificial sugar scent sprayed over it. It made me sick, and it was so hot outside. I kept going to work. Eventually, work cut my hours to the point where I literally had 1 hour a week. I could not live on $6 a week. I could not meet Jen's expectations of my wallet on $6 a week. I was about near nervous breakdown. I slept as much as possible to avoid reality. I couldn't communicate with anyone. I saw Sid sometimes, and he gave me sympathetic looks, but God. One day at work, it rained. It rained so hard it knocked out the power, so we were sent home. I had no umbrella, no raincoat, no money for one. So I walked in the rain. My shoes were soaked, so I left them outside the apartment to dry overnight. That evening, after the rain, Jen tried to talk to me about God lying in the grass with Sid. Sid already could tell my mood was unpleasant and didn't even try to push the matter. Jen kept trying to make me say that I believed in God. I don't. And when I'm angry, it's the worst time to try and make me believe. She tried pretending to be a small child and crying, and I wound up yelling at her about it, and she ran back to the apartment fake crying. Sid said if I ever needed help, just to ask him. The next morning, someone stole my shoes. You may think it's a silly reason to snap, but that's what it did. This god-awful town, these god-awful people who were bleeding me dry. I saw fit that my money was not enough. They had to take my shoes too. I'd had it. I just had it. I pulled a sheet of paper out of Hojo's computer campus login name. I stole some keys. I threw some edible trash to my poor rat who was starving too. I threw a change of clothes, a pocket knife, all the money I had, $5, into my bag along with my sketchbook, a pencil, and I walked, shoeless. I had no money. I couldn't leave town. But being so poor in a town for so long, I learned where I could find the cheapest food and drink. I could get a bagel for 50 cents, and a drink for 75. The streets were hot, burned to feet, but hurt like hell. But when it was done, I went to my job, poked my head in. I couldn't actually go to work because of the no shoes policy. I quit. Didn't make sense to work there anymore. I'd hang around the bus stop or in front of the churchyard and sit in the shade and draw and think. I tried to think of what to do. People would notice me, torn pants, bare feet, and just shrug it off and laugh. Someone stole my shoes, man. Can you believe it? Jesus, that sucks. I was homeless for a few days. All in all, I felt fantastic. I felt great. Better than the fucking entire 2 months I spent with them. I had the freedom to walk where I wanted, sit down where I wanted. There were no smells. There was no fighting. No one was ordering me to buy steak. I wasn't sick on the food that I ate. No one was waking me up to tell me to go outside and look at fairy rings. I swear to you, I would much rather be homeless than live with people like them ever again. The threat of homelessness does not faze me, because I have seen something so much worse. I spent a good deal of time in the open campus computer labs, logged in on Hojo's password. I got a new AIM name and hid from them, adding all my friends back and telling them one by one what had happened. They were horrified. Turns out Jen accidentally called Czar, who lives in California, and demanded to know where I was. I'm sorry, actually, not accidentally. Czar was worried. We actually had a casual conversation on AIM like we used to. It felt so good to do so. Thinking back on it, I get all choked up. Finally, I was fucking free to say what I wanted and not be afraid. I called home collect because I could not stay here. I didn't ask my mother for money. Never ask my mother for money, or you'll get screamed at for being unappreciative. I just wanted to say I was okay and planned on coming home somehow. She gave me a deadline, said be home at X date for a week and you can babysit your sister, who was old enough to take care of herself at this age, and I was enraged that I was being told to watch her. Alright, whatever. Knowing it was impossible. I am Sid. I was actually afraid of asking for help from anyone in town for fear that they'd tell Jen where I was and I'd be dragged back. I was scared to the point of shaking. I did not want to go anywhere near there. I was afraid because I knew how much they'd figured me out. I knew if I was left alone I might be talked into going back. So I was scared, but I told Sid what had happened, kind of, and asked if I could stay at his house maybe a night or something. Sid is my fucking saint for what he did. I may get mad at him for whatever else, but this guy fucking came riding to the rescue. He came into town, not only already taking my mind off of it by talking about old RPGs, but offered to pay for some beers, and we'd splendid old times. I slept on his floor. More or less, he figured out what I was afraid of, and went with me to get my stuff from Jen and Hojo's apartment a few days later. I didn't have a lot. Jen was at the door trying to look like I was betraying her horribly. I knew after I left the next to be Aries, but I didn't care. I didn't care how many people they had come tell me I was awful. I just wanted out. My poor rat came with us, just glad to be back with me, I think. And my computer. I was able to use Sid's DSL, and oh, God, heaven. Truth. I could tell the truth. I had all my stuff, and I was out of there. I called my father using, I think, Sid's phone. Finally able to tell him what happened. I didn't want to tell him everything because it sounded crazy. But he had about 30 seconds before he got my uncle on AIM, and they were ordering plane tickets to Alabama. I was getting out. I made friends with Sid's apartment mates, Jay and his fiancée, Shell. We all got along really well, and Shell went off on gin about 10,000 times. Shell also took me to a supermarket and told me to buy what I wanted. Probably would have cried, but I was so much in shock. All I wanted was potato bread and ramen. I had not eaten either of these the entire time I stayed there, even though my money had paid the food bill. I got to the bus station on time, using money Sid had lent me that my dad would pay him back to ride to the airport. Took a flight, had a pair of $2 painful flip-flops on. They were swapped for explosives. There were a few drawings of Kyo back at this time, most notably the ones that are in the links, but which was from my shoes that were stolen wandering around barefoot when I kicked over a can of lemonade in the airport, just too brain dead and exhausted to stand it back up. After the week of eating like a wolf at my dad's house, can you say 4 chicken breasts and 2 wings? I knew you could. We road trip back to State College where we would camp out along the way. Summer was so hot, the road actually caused my father's car engine to overheat. We had to take it to a repair shop because the valley heat fucked it up that much. And I'd been walking to work in the same heat every day with no water, no protection. My dad did not get to meet Sid, who was at work, but did meet Shell. He paid Shell, we packed up my things. I left Sid a little note, I think, and I was gone. I was out. Jen tried calling me once after that, but I blocked her number on my cell phone shortly after. She tried telling me that we were still friends, and she looked for my shoes. I was having none of it. I'm some sort of villain to them now, but I have no clue what, nor do I really care. I must have been some sort of magical, evil power in their eyes, but I don't know. I was finished with them, and I forever will be. Unfortunately, that's not the end of this story for other people. But that is the end of this little story here, kids. This is pretty wild. This is insane, but I'm going to read more, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. You can like, comment, subscribe, and I also have a Patreon. You can give me $1. That'd be really cool. Okay, bye.